Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So we continue where we left off last class. And just a very quick recap. It's the statement of the author, alayhi rahmatullah. Thus far we've taken the beginning of the statement of the author where he said, وَاعْلَمْ رحمك الله أن الكلام في الرب تعالى محدث وهو بدعة وضلالة. Know and realize, may Allah have mercy upon you, that speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a newly invented matter, an innovation and misguidance. And thus far, in the explanation of Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, we said what's being referred to here is with regard to talking about the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, talking about His names and His attributes in a manner that's not legislated. وَلَا يُتَكَلَّمُ فِي الرَّبِّ إِلَّا بِمَا وَصَفَ بِهِ نَفْسَهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ فِي الْقُرْآنِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not to be spoken about except with that which He has described Himself with in the Qur'an. وَمَا بَيَّنَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ لِأَصْحَابِهِ. And as well as how the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has clarified to the companions. فَهُوَ جَلَّ ثَنَاؤُهُ وَاحِدٌ. So He subhanahu wa ta'ala جَلَّ ثَنَاؤُهُ, He's one. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing that is like Him, and He's the all-hear, the all-seer. رَبُّنَا أَوَّلٌ بِلَا مَتَى. Our Lord is the first without a beginning. وَآخِرٌ بِلَا مُنْتَهَى. And He's the last without an ending. يَعْلَمُ السِّرَّ وَأَخْفَى. He knows that which is secret and that which is hidden. وَهُوَ عَلَى عَرْشِهِ اسْتَوَى. And He ascended over the throne. وَعِلْمُهُ بِكُلِّ مَكَانٍ. His knowledge encompasses every place. وَلَا يَخْلُو مِنْ عِلْمِهِ مَكَانٍ. There's no place that is devoid of His knowledge. His knowledge encompasses everything. So today we're going to continue where we left off. The statement of the author alayhi rahmatullah, قَوْلُهُ يَعْلَمُ السِّرَّ وَأَخْفَى وَهُوَ عَلَى عَرْشِهِ اسْتَوَى. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows that which is secret and that which is even more hidden. He knows what's secret and He knows what is hidden. وَهُوَ عَلَى عَرْشِهِ اسْتَوَى. He ascended over His throne. فَكَوْنُهُ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَمَا تَحْتَ الْأَرْضِ وَمَا تَحْتَ الثَّرَى لَا يَتَنَافَى مَعَ كَوْنِهِ فَوْقَ الْعَرْشِ. So this point right here is very, very important. Because as we've mentioned more than once, the vast majority of Muslims, due to ignorance, if you were to ask them where is Allah, they'll say that Allah is everywhere. So this detail that the Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan is mentioning right here is very crucial. He says the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in the earth, He knows what's under the earth, this doesn't negate the fact that He's above His throne. It doesn't negate the fact that He is above His throne. لأن الله جل وعلا يحيط بكل شيء. This is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He encompasses everything. His knowledge encompasses everything. وَلَا يُحِيطُ بِهِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى شَيْءٍ. And nothing encompasses Him. Nothing encompasses Him. وَالْخَلْقُ كُلُّهُ بِالنِّسْبَةِ إِلَيْهِ صَغِيرٌ كَلَا شَيْءٍ. And the creation, all of the creation, in comparison to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's small and is as though it's nothing. وَهُوَ الْعَظِيمُ الْكَبِيرُ الْمُتَعَالِ الْجَلِيلُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى. So Allah is Al-Azim. He's the most great. Al-Kabir, the meaning is similar. Al-Muta'al, the most high. Al-Jalil, the sublime. فَلَا نُقِيسُهُ بِأَنفُسِنَا. فَلَا نَقِيسُهُ بِأَنفُسِنَا. So we do not, compare ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We cannot compare ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا قَدَرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدَرِهِ وَالْأَرْضُ جَمِيعًا قَبْضَتُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَّاتٌ بِيَمِينِهِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى عَمَّا يُشْرِكُونَ. The meaning of the verse, and they did not venerate Allah with the veneration that is due to him. And on the day of judgment, all of the earth is going to be in his grip. The entire earth is going to be at his grasp. وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَّاتٌ بِيَمِينِهِ. And the heavens are going to be rolled up in his right hand. Subhanahu wa ta'ala amma yushrikun. And glorified and exalted is Allah, high above that which they ascribe to him. So the Shaykh, he says, al-makhluqat bin-nisbati ilay kala shay. So the creation, all of the creation in comparison to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like nothing. وَإِن كَانَتْ فِي أَنظَارِ النَّاسِ عَظِيمَةً لكن بالنسبة إليه كلا شيء أمام عظمته سبحانه وتعالى. Even though, right, in our perception, the way that we see things, that there are things in this creation that are very great and tremendous, however, in comparison to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in comparison to His greatness, it's as though it's nothing. From the things that we can see without a telescope, what's the biggest thing that we can see? The sun. The sun. Alright? In this universe, from the things that we can see with a telescope and without a telescope, is the sun. That's the biggest thing. How many earths do you think you can fit in the sun? Huh? Who said that? How many? Huh? 0.3 million? 1.3 million. Alright, something like that. Over 1 million earths, according to scientists, they say more than 1 million earths can fit in the sun. That's the sun. The sun. Alright? Is the sun the greatest and the largest of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What's the largest of the creation and the greatest of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Huh? Al-Kawn.
There's other galaxies in the...
No, I'm talking about is bigger than that.
Bigger than the...
Huh? The Arsh. The throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it comes in a hadith that's authenticated by al-Barbahārī alayhi rahmatullah. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, مَا السَّمَاوَاتُ السَّبْعِ فِي الْكُرْسِيِّ إِلَّا كَحَلْقَةٍ مُلْقَاةٍ بِأَرْضِ فَلَاهٍ وَفَضْلُ الْعَرْشِ عَلَى الْكُرْسِيِّ كَفَضْلِ تِلْكَ الْفَلَاةِ عَلَى تِلْكَ الْحَلْقَةِ. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, the seven earths, or the seven heavens rather, and there are 7 earths as well. He said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the meaning of it, the 7 heavens, in comparison to the kursi. What's the kursi? The footstool of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the footstool. When I'm talking about the arsh, the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The 7 heavens, in comparison to the footstool, is like a ring that's thrown into a desert. You can't really wrap your head around it. You take a little ring, maybe one of the brothers got a ring on, I don't know. But you know how small a ring is. If you were to get the Sahara Desert, for example, and that's not even the biggest desert technically, but if you were to get a ring and then throw it in the desert, what would you say about that ring right there? It's nothing. It's as though it's nothing. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that the 7 heavens, in comparison to the footstool, is like a ring that's thrown into the desert. وَفَضْلُ الْعَرْشِ عَلَى الْكُرْسِيِّ كَفَضْلِ تِلْكَ الْفَلَاةِ عَلَى تِلْكَ الْحَلْقَةِ. And the virtue of the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in comparison to the footstool is like that desert in comparison to the ring. And it's the opposite. So this shows that the arsh is way bigger than the kursi. The kursi in comparison to the arsh is like a ring that's thrown into a desert. That's how much bigger it is in comparison. You can't fathom or put your mind around it. You can't comprehend something that large. So if that's the case when it comes to creation, then of course the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is way greater. So the Shaykh, he says, وَإِن كَانَتْ فِي أَنظَارِ النَّاسِ عَظِيمَةً لكن بالنسبة إليه كلا شيء أمام عظمته سبحانه وتعالى. So the way that people perceive things or look at things, these different creations, the sun, the planets, and so on and so forth, even the throne and the footstool of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is great. Is great in our view. But in comparison to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His greatness is like nothing. لكن هؤلاء ما قدروا الله حق قدره حين جحدوا قدرته وعظمته. However, these individuals, meaning the disbelievers, they did not give Allah the reverence that's due to Him. When they denied or they rejected His ability and His greatness. And He mentions a verse, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ ضُرِبَ مَثَلٌ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ. O humanity, an example has been put forth, so listen to it. As similar to it has been put forth, so listen to it. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ لَنْ يَخْلُقُوا ذُبَابًا وَلَوْ اجْتَمَعُوا لَهُ. Those who you invoke beside Allah, they cannot even create a fly, even if all of them were to come together for that purpose. وَإِنْ يَسْلُبْهُمُ الذُّبَابُ شَيْئًا لَا يَسْتَنْقِذُوهُ مِنْهُ. And if that little fly was to snatch something or take something from them, they wouldn't be able to recover it. They wouldn't be able to retrieve it from the fly. ضَعُفَ الطَّالِبُ وَالْمَطْلُوبُ. Right? The seeker and the one that's being sought are both weak. What's being referred to here by al-Talibu wal-Matlub? What's this with regard to? ضعف الطالب والمطلوب. حسب السياق. It's based upon the context. We're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, O humanity, an example has been put forth for you. So listen to it. Those who you invoke beside Allah, they cannot create a fly, even if all of them were to come together for that purpose. And if it was to take something from them or seize something from them, they wouldn't be able to retrieve it. ضَعُفَ الطَّالِبُ وَالْمَطْلُوبُ. The seeker and the one that sought are both weak. What's being implied right here? Ibn Abbas, radiyallahu anhuma, he said, al-Talibu is a sanam, is the idol, is that statue that the polytheists worship. Wal-Matlub is the dhubab, that is referring to the fly. And some of the scholars of tafsir, they said al-Talibu right here is al-Abid. It's a person that's worshipping other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and al-Matlub is the thing that's being worshipped beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَا قَدَرُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدَرِهِ. They did not venerate Allah with the veneration that's due to Him. مَا عَرَفُوا عَظَمَةَ اللَّهِ وَقُدْرَتَهُ وَجَلَالَهُ وَعِلْمَهُ. They don't know the greatness and the ability and the magnificence and the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَهُمْ يُقِيسُونَهُ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ. So they compare themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلِذَلِكَ تَنَقَّصُوا اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. And this is the reason why they belittle and degrade Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With regard to the mushrikun who worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Shaykh, he says, إِذَا كُنْتُمْ بِأَجْمَعِكُمْ مِنْ أَوَّلِكُمْ إِلَى آخِرِكُمْ وَجِنِّكُمْ وَإِنسِكُمْ لَوْ اجْتَمَعْتُمْ لِخَلْقِ ذُبَابٍ أَقَلِّ شَيْءٍ لَا تَسْتَطِيعُونَ. So the Shaykh, he said, if all of you were to come together, the first of you and the last of you. The first of us starts with Adam, and the last person, Allah knows best who is it going to be. The first of you and the last of you. The jinn of you and the mankind of you. If you all came together for the purpose of creating a fly, one single fly, and this is, like the smallest of things, you want to have the ability. وَخُصُوصًا الَّذِينَ تَدْعُونَهُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ مِنَ الْآلِهَةِ وَالْأَرْبَابِ. Especially those who invoke other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are those who are invoked, those whom you invoke other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the false gods, and those rivals that are set up with Allah azza wa jalla. لَن يَخْلُقُوا ذُبَابًا وَلَوْ اجْتَمَعُوا لَهُ. Right? They cannot even create a single fly, even if all of them came together for that purpose. And he mentions, if you got the most, the best doctors, the best physicians, the most sharpest people when it comes to technology and innovation and so on and so forth, and you told them, make for us a single fly. أوجدوا لنا ذبابا لا يستطيعون. If you were to tell them, create for us a fly, they wouldn't have the ability. They wouldn't have the ability. مع أنهم يستطيعون أن يبنوا البواخر الهائلة. Right? They have the ability to make large vessels, like big cargo boats and so on and so forth. Right? They can put a little airport on it, and it can carry planes and so on and so forth. It can make these large planes, but they don't have the ability to make a single fly. They don't have the ability to make a fly and to put the soul into it, to give it life. Right? All of these different individuals that have all of these skills, they can do these type of things when it comes to technology, but when it comes to creating a real fly, nobody can do it other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, هُمْ يُصَوِّرُونَ صُورَةَ الذُّبَابِ وَالْإِنسَانِ. This is the extent of what human beings can do. Right? They can make the images of a fly and a person. وَالسَّبُعِ. Right? They can make the images of beasts of prey, like lions, tigers, and so on and so forth. وَنَحْوَ ذَلِكَ. And other than this. لكن لا يستطيعون أن يجعلوه يمشي ويتكلم. But they don't have the ability to make that image start walking and speaking. No one has that ability. The only thing that they can do is draw. That's it. They can perhaps, even with all the technology, the AI, whatever you see, they try to make robots that have the ability to talk, and they can make facial expressions like a human being. And if you were to look at it, and you're not really paying attention, it might look like a real person. But it has no soul. It's a robot. It's made out of metal. It's not really a human being at the end of the day. What do you say? Yeah, it doesn't really have emotion. This is the extent of what human beings can do. And this is with all of these, the advancements in technology. You compare even 10 years ago to now, or 20 years ago, it's been a big leap in technology. But this is the extent of what human beings can do. We don't have the ability to create even a single fly. He says, لكن نفخ الروح من أمر الله جل وعلا. When it comes to putting a soul inside of something, this is something that's by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فكيف يقاس الخالق جل وعلا بالمخلوق. So how can the Creator be compared with the creation? لا تبلغه العقول والأوهام ولا تتخيله الأفكار سبحانه وتعالى. Right, the minds cannot comprehend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the thoughts of people, they cannot imagine how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Question: is it permissible for a person to imagine or think how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is? You say no. What's your proof?
Would that be considered shirk?
He said, would it be considered shirk? Nah. So the proof is the verse that's already been mentioned in the verse that we took earlier. The verse, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There's nothing that's like him. وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. And he's the all-hear, the all-seer. This verse establishes is nothing like him. In this dunya, whatever we see, that's the extent of our knowledge. Even in Jannah, there are going to be things that have the same names. Like in the Quran, you find rumman, pomegranate. There's going to be fruits in paradise. Things that we're familiar with in terms of its name in this dunya, but in the hereafter, it's not going to be the same. It's going to be completely different. The only thing that's the same is the name. This is just with regard to created things. So when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's more exalted and He's more lofty than that. So it's impossible for a person to fathom or imagine how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And it comes in a hadith that Shaykh al-Albani alayhi rahmatullah, he authenticated two narrations. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Tafakkaru fi ala'illah." He said, contemplate and reflect upon the blessings and the bounties of Allah. وَلَا تَفَكَّرُوا فِي اللَّهِ. And do not contemplate and reflect upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, it's not permissible for a person to think about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, His essence, His names and His attributes and so on. It's not permissible. And it comes to another narration, and Shaykh al-Albani, he also authenticated this, and he said it was Hasan. تَفَكَّرُوا فِي خَلْقِ اللَّهِ. Contemplate and reflect upon the creation of Allah. وَلَا تَفَكَّرُوا فِي اللَّهِ. But don't contemplate and reflect upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not possible. It's not possible for a person to achieve this in this dunya. Na'am. So inshallah we'll suffice with this for tonight. وَسُبْحَانَكَ اللَّهُمَّ وَبِحَمْدِكَ أَشْهَدُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ أَسْتَغْفِرُكَ وَأَتُوبُ إِلَيْكَ.